all right, chat. Oop, hang on, I need to. What the fuck? Hang on, I need to adjust the frame because it's not properly sized. Oh wait, shit. But it will be once I full size it. Duh. I'm a professional, I promise. I am a professional streamer. I am. Professional streamer here, chat. I know what I'm doing. Promise. I'm professional. I went to school for this and everything. Mm-hmm. Okay, chat. So, and this is about basically the life of Steve Irwin. So I think, it's a 25-minute video. So this is this is going to be just telling the tale of Steve Irwin's life. Be ready because there may be some tears involved here. Because Steve Irwin is one of the most beautiful humans in our lifetime. So, Watanashi, stop it. So, yeah. Oh, Hackle. You get a bonk on that one. Alright, let's open this. Let's go.
If they're biting you, you know you've got them. This is one of countless colourful quotes from Steve Irwin, a nearly unparalleled ambassador for wildlife known across the globe simply as the Crocodile Hunter. A title it's hard to argue Irwin didn't earn and then some, with footage of the man himself manhandling crocodiles the length of cars abounding. But here's the thing. When the thing you're known for is wrestling 1,000 pounds of teeth and scales into submission with a smile and khaki shorts, people tend to want to know more about that than the specifics of your life and how you got there for some reason. But just how did adorable baby Steve Irwin go from a typical human to one who spent his days diving from perfectly safe boats into croc-infested waters? Well, I'm glad you asked, because today we're going to be covering a heartwarming story of the life of Steve Irwin.
I don't know a whole lot about Steve Irwin's childhood.
We're discussing the amazing life of one of the coolest humans to ever human. If you're serious about your business, side hustle, or creative project, you need a website that actually works for you. Not just something that looks great, but something that helps you grow, attracts the right audience, and makes you money. Enter today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is built for anyone who wants a professional, feature-rich online presence without needing to be a tech genius or designer. And even if you are a tech genius,
how much they're
going
to
go
into
save
his
a boatload
movie.
Of time via their platform.
Because if they don't go all that much in his movie, I have one or two
service
things
like
to say about his
still would have
movie.
been so amazing back when I started today. I found out about 15 years ago as a website,
I forget
spending
what
forever
his son's
getting
name
it up and
is.
working, including a whole
but yeah,
lot
he
of
has a
custom
boy and a
coding,
girl.
server setup, and playing whack-a-mole after.
To the life of me, I
with
can't
things like
remember
adjusting to search
his son's
engine
name.
trends. At
His
one
son
point,
is
a
actually
random bug that
running
took the website down for about a week
the zoo
before I
that
figured it out,
Steve used
as
to
well
run.
as
He's
other
in charge of
random
it
outages
now,
requiring
and
me to
Bindi,
stop what I
I
was
think, is
doing and
doing
fix it right then.
either
But with
kids
Squarespace,
shows
you
or
don't have
Robert.
to do
Thank
or
you,
worry
Dwight. Yeah,
about
Robert
any of
is
that.
is
You
running
start with a
the Australia
stunning,
Zoo,
award-winning
I believe.
template, and if you want
I think he's
something
running
even more
Australia
unique,
Zoo.
their
And
Blueprint AI
Bindi,
can create
last
a
I
custom
remember,
site
she
tailored to
and
your
this was a
brand,
while
style,
ago.
and goals.
I'd heard she
No
was doing
blank pages,
kids
no
shows.
overthinking,
She
just
might
a
be
polished,
writing
professional
children's
website
books.
in
I'm
minutes.
not
And because a great
sure.
website isn't much use
So
if no one can
she's
find
kind
it,
of, she's
Squarespace
kind
takes
of
care
gone
of search engine
a little bit more to the
optimization for you,
entertainment
from meta
version
descriptions, page
of
structure, to
presenting
an
conservation.
auto-generated sitemap. It's all handled for you. Whether you're promoting a new product, booking clients, or updating
And his
customers,
wife has also
you
said
can do
she
it
will
all
never
from
marry
one
again
place
because
without
Steve was the
juggling
absolute
different
lover for
platforms.
life.
It's everything
And
you
she will
need to
never
grow
marry
all
again.
in one powerful, easy-to-use platform. So don't just put your business out there, make it
That's
thrive.
scummy as hell, Alex.
Squarespace.com/brainfood
I hate people that
for
do
a
that.
free
That is
trial.
fucking
And
evil.
when you're ready to launch, use offer code BRAINFOOD to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Now let's get back to Simon and the amazing life of the crocodile hunter, Steve Irwin.
To begin with, it should be noted that by all accounts, the man we saw on TV excitedly placing deadly snakes on his head was Steve Irwin, whether the cameras were rolling or not. In every interview that we could find with a family member, co-worker, or employee where they discussed such things, they all confirmed that Irwin was just like that all of the time, much like two other of the legends.
Ragtag? I do not know, honestly. That I had not heard about people, like, doing, like, revenge killings of stingrays. I hadn't heard anything about that. It's entirely possible that they did. I didn't hear about it. It's entirely possible that they did. Which is unfortunate because, kind of like the whole thing with Mr. Rogers, Yeah, it's not something Steve would have wanted. Steve would not have wanted people to do that. Yeah. It's really unfortunate that if people were doing that.
Of the TV world in Mr. Rogers and Bob Ross, what you saw on camera was who they were. In Irwin's case, however, his persona was not always universally well received.
Well, about how he saw the good in everybody,
Irwin's
Leo.
native Australia, where some critics of his personality and antics sometimes described him as a walking caricature of Australian stereotypes. Something Irwin himself was well aware of and largely brushed off, stating in a 2003...
Steve Irwin never used tranquilizers when subduing crocodiles. Cheer
No,
100.
he would not. I've seen him. He will physically, and I forgot I got to turn that off. He will physically handle, notice I say handle, not manhandle, but he will physically subdue a crocodile with the express purpose of not harming the crocodile. And he would very often do it on his own with only Terri. Just the two of them. Him and Terri would often go out by themselves and subdue a crocodile that needed to be relocated or something. He would do it. They would do it all by themselves. No big team. He would just go in with a jaw rope, and he would grab a hold of it. They would fight to get it into the boat, to get it secured so they can relocate it, and they could spend 15, 20 minutes and that's on the small side, subduing a crocodile. They had the patience to subdue a crocodile, but do it without harming the crocodile and without using any tranquilizers or anything like that, by themselves. It's incredible to watch.
Documentary. They're looking at me as this very popular wildlife warrior Australian bloke. And yet, back here in my own country, some people find me a little bit embarrassing. They kind of cringe, because I'm coming out with crikey, and look at this beauty. Is it a cultural cringe? Is it that they actually see a little bit of themselves when they see me, and they find that a little bit embarrassing? A quote that's kind of sad to read when you realize the main thing Irwin was being criticized for is being unapologetically himself whilst showing a genuine enthusiasm and appreciation for Australia's endemic wildlife and people. This is not too dissimilar from the legend that is actor Danny Trejo's response when a reporter leveled similar criticism against him. Trejo states, "I remember the first time anyone interviewed me. It was this young Chicana out of college, real into La Raza. Danny, don't you feel you're being stereotyped? You're always playing the mean Chicano dude with tattoos." So I lifted up my shirt and said, "What are you talking about? I am the mean Chicano dude with tattoos."
I'm gonna disagree with that because Danny Trejo, just like Steve Irwin, is an absolute sweetheart. He is not a mean Chicano dude. He is an amazing Chicano dude with all the tattoos. He is. Danny Trejo is everything I've ever heard about him. He is an absolute sweetheart. Oh yes, Leo, he was.
But going back to Irwin, his father, Robert Eric Irwin, is a renowned lizard expert or herpetologist as well as a conservationist, while his mother, Lynn Haakenson, who passed away in 2000, was a nurse. Now, from that description, you'd think Steve Irwin's infectious love of all creatures great and small would be the result of his father's influence. But according to the man himself, his appreciation for wildlife and desire to see it protected and cared for actually originally came from his mother, who Irwin would frequently refer to simply as the Mother Teresa of wildlife rehabilitation in interviews. This shared love of animals and a desire.
Coming from Steve Irwin, that is high fucking praise. If he's going to refer to his own mother as the Mother Teresa of animals, fucking hell, that is high praise. Coming from Steve Irwin himself.
To care for them, often saw a younger Irwin being late for school, with classmates and teachers later recalling that it wasn't too uncommon for Irwin to roll into class an hour after the bell rang, citing concern for an injured lizard or snake that he didn't want to leave by the side of the road. Speaking of school, Irwin had no formal education in anything related to animal care or herpetology, learning basically everything he knew about wildlife from first-hand experience, of which he had a lifetime of. Irwin summed up his education as simply being excited about something, and as for his teaching, simply having the desire to share that excitement with others. but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to being raised with crocodiles. In the early 1970s, Irwin's family moved from the suburbs of Melbourne, where he was born in 1962 and where his father had worked as, of all things, a plumber, to Queensland, where he, along with his wife, founded the Beerwah Reptile Park. Initially, the Irwins, which consisted of Bob, Lynn, Steve, and Steve's siblings, Joy and Mandy, lived in an RV, but Bob soon used his plumbing and construction skills to build the family a shed to poop in and later a house to call home. During this time, Steve was educated on...
I'm sorry, the joke just popped in my head. I have to say it. A shed. For him to poop in? Sorry, I had to. The joke popped into my head. I had to say it. I had to.
On all things crocodile, helping his mother care for sick animals and his father wrangle ones that were causing trouble. For anyone curious, trouble could be anything from encroaching on private land to trying to eat people. And that begs the question, why was a small child helping their father relocate potentially man-eating crocodiles in the first place? Well,
it was his
the
destiny.
Of course. You see, when Bob Irwin set up the Beerwah Reptile Park, one of the stated goals was to assist with the protection of Australia's wildlife by relocating problem animals on behalf of the government or private individuals who would have otherwise killed them. For the most part, this involved simply moving the animals far away from humans, but in cases where the animal was injured or posed a significant risk to others, it would be relocated to the Beerwah Reptile Park for its own protection and then used as an educational tool, in essence becoming an ambassador for its species rather than a pair of shoes or a handbag. As a child, Irwin would assist his father in this, by his own admission, stating he wrestled his first croc at 9 years old. Clearly a late bloomer.
What?
In this case,
I'm sorry, what? Steve Irwin wrestled his first crocodile at 9 fucking years old? Holy shit! Tanashi, I kinda doubt it. Like, okay. I think I should probably say that I don't think he did that by himself. Okay? I don't think he wrestled his first croc at 9 by himself. I fully expect that he was assisting his dad in wrestling a crocodile. His dad probably did the lion's share of the quote-unquote wrestling. Like, his dad probably was handling the jaws. And he probably was handling the body. That would be my guess. Because even Steve does not go and wrestle crocs solo. He will have someone with him. So that's my guess, is like his dad probably handled the snout, whereas Steve, like, was basically, like, securing the body. But that's still wrestling a fucking crocodile. Regardless, if that's the case. Now, maybe it's a baby one or a juvenile. It's entirely possible. Maybe they'll get into specifics here. It's still at fucking 9 years old in the Australian outback where very few people, dare to tread. It's impressive.
Casey popped his crocodile cherry by leaping directly onto its back from a dinghy, in admission stating he wrestled his first croc at 9 years old. Clearly a late bloomer. In this case, he popped his crocodile cherry by leaping directly onto its back from a dinghy and then dragging it out of the water, a technique he would refine over the years and would become his trademark move. As to this, in the many, many interviews Irwin gave about the topic, his general technique for ensuring optimum crocodile capture and minimum being turned into crocodile poo was more or less as follows. The first step is sizing up the crocodile, a difficult task considering in many situations the crocodile will be submerged beyond full visibility. Fortunately for Irwin, there's apparently a fairly simple way to tell how big a crocodile is, shining a torch directly in its eyes, which will result in a telltale glint that a seasoned expert like Irwin could use to roughly gauge the size of the entire animal. We'll just have to take his word on that. Irwin further stated he'd generally only attempt to single-handedly capture a crocodile under 6 feet in length. Why? Well, past that length, he'd be unable to fully control the tail, which on larger crocodiles can strike with the force of a leathery organic sledgehammer when the animal animal is thrashing about, which it's obviously going to do when someone leaps onto its back. Thus, if it were larger than that, Irwin would instead opt to lure the animals into a specially constructed crocodile-shaped cage with food before subduing it, or if the animal needed to be restrained then and there, getting a helper, usually his wife, Terri, to focus on restraining the tail while he grabs the more dangerous end. On that note of their partnership, not just at home but at work, Terri would state, "We don't drink, we don't smoke, we are actually in love and happily married. We love our little girl. We go home to each other at night, and we believe in what we are doing. Say my husband had a dangerous job, but I wasn't with him. I don't know how you go, 'Oh, honey, how was it with the police department today? You got all your fingers and toes today?' It would scare me. I'd have to become a police officer and work with him. I couldn't do it."
Wow. Chat, that's the kind of woman that you want to have as a wife. That she's like, you're going to go out there and risk yourself. In this case, for the safety and the conservation of animals, God damn it, I'm going with you. I'm going to be right there with you, fighting back the danger every step of the way. This was, excuse me, she was fucking wonderful. They were like, they didn't make, like, their partnership, their marriage didn't showcase in the news a lot because, you know, while Steve was still alive, the internet was not as prevalent in talking about the perfect couple, where the internet now loves to say, like, oh, so-and-so and so-and-so are so loving and they're the perfect couple. Like, back when Steve was still alive, the internet was not in that phase yet. So very few people probably know that Steve and Terri Irwin were like the perfect fucking couple. And there was never any controversy about them. There was never any question whatsoever that they loved one another. And like I said, after Steve's passing, they had no drama. The only thing they had to sell on terms of news or TV is when they would go onto news broadcasts or they would go onto talk shows to showcase animals and to promote conservation and to promote education about these animals. And like I said, I think she'd given an interview after Steve passed and said that she was never, like, this was like some time after his passing. I believe they'd done an interview with Terri, and she said she was never going to marry again because Steve was her perfect mate. There was never going to be someone else for her. Steve was the only one that was for her, and she would never marry again. And yeah, it's her, probably, her residency status, because Terri is American. They'll probably get into basically how he met Terri, but she is American, and I'm not sure, what her status is, like her, residency or citizenship status is in Australia. I can imagine, even if the news decide to make some shit about it, I would have to imagine that the Australian government would just fucking grant her citizenship in Australia if she chose to remain in Australia, which I believe she has to raise her children. Like, Steve and Terri Irwin were fucking are national treasures of Australia. They are probably some of the best ambassadors that the country of Australia has ever had. Hands down.
Going back to the more dangerous end of the animal, Irwin's second crocodile wrestling tip was to immediately seek to force the creature's mouth shut, which is apparently relatively easy, as while the muscles used to close its mouth are incredibly powerful, the ones used to open it are relatively weak. So weak, in fact, that a typical man can forcibly keep the jaws shut with their bare hands, provided they also possess the necessary set of lead-lined balls required to actually leap onto the crocodile in the first place. At this point, depending on the size of the animal, it can be further restrained by either the person wrestling it or a helper, which generally involves binding the creature's mouth and/or legs. Alternately, you can simply lie atop the crocodile until it tires and mostly gives up, allowing it to be maneuvered more easily. This was
He
a
had
technique
balls of
Irwin
fucking
would adopt with
tungsten, Leo.
particularly
Let's
large
get that right.
crocodiles, usually employing an entire team to dogpile the creature until it was fatigued enough to be handled without risk of injury to itself or to those trying to help it. As mentioned, Irwin was entirely self-taught when it came to handling crocodiles and other similarly deadly creatures, and many biographies of the man and interviews with those who knew him personally talk about the fact that he had a seeming sixth sense for wildlife honed over a lifetime, which is why he appeared so natural and at ease handling even the most dangerous creatures. As the man himself would note, snakes are very instinctive to me. I've been handling them since before I could walk. Going back to his formative years in school itself, this was seemingly uneventful, save for all the time off Irwin took due to saving animals, and on the side, he was reportedly also an excellent rugby player, playing for his high school team, the Caloundra Sharks. As you could probably guess, given that Irwin wrestled half-ton crocodiles for fun, he was apparently pretty good at tackling and bringing down humans as well. This isn't a
Can you imagine Steve Irwin as a rugby player where he's going after someone and just like in his mind's eye, he just like the person shape shifts and turns into like a crocodile running on two legs. He's like, come here, you big beauty, kablam.
say that he was impossible to beat, though, and there is a popular story told about the time Irwin visited the training grounds of the Brisbane
Shadows, that's
Broncos
what I've
and run
heard too.
afoul of one of the most dominant players the sport of rugby has ever seen, Shane Webker. Irwin asked if he could attempt to tackle Webker to see if his skills wrangling crocodiles would translate to wrangling a beast of a man. For anyone familiar with Webker or the sport of rugby, this request was akin to asking Mike Tyson in his prime to punch you in the face to see whether or not you could take it. In the end, Webker complied with the request and ultimately tackled Irwin like the World Cup was on the line. To Irwin's credit, while he utterly failed in bringing Webker down, he did manage to do something very few men tackled by him at full force were able to do. Stand up afterwards and smile and shake his hand. Getting back to Irwin's post-school life, he spent the first decade after schooling assisting his father on behalf of the Australian government with the removal and relocation of troublesome wildlife to the family zoo and elsewhere, which on the former rebranded to the Queensland Reptile and Fauna Park around the 1980s. During this period, Irwin also became something of a local celebrity by taking part in the crocodile feeding shows that became a staple draw of the Birla Reptile Park. Finally, in 1991,
and the crocodile feeding at the zoo, that is the one singular point of controversy that I can recall was ever said about Steve Irwin. Was one particular incident of his feeding. And yes, Cortanas, there was one time where Steve Irwin was doing his crocodile feeding at the Australia Zoo, and he was holding Bindi in his arm at the time while feeding the crocodiles. And yeah, like it was typical media shit trying to make it look like he was endangering his child. Was it Robert? I thought it was with Bindi. It was with Robert? Okay, I'm getting which one of his children was wrong. I thought it was Bindi that he was doing it with. But yeah, like they had a bad angle on it, so they made it seem like he was so close to the crocodile, and you know, there was big headlines like, oh, he put his child in danger. And it was like Steve Irwin was in control the entire time. His child was never in any danger, but that is the one singular time that I can think of that there was a quote unquote controversy when it came to Steve Irwin. And it wasn't even a controversy because it was the media blowing shit way out of proportion, as usual. And either Robert or Biddy, whichever one it was, it was perfectly safe the entire time.
The senior Irwin gifted the park in its entirety to his son. Shortly after assuming ownership, Irwin met his aforementioned future wife, an American named Terri Raines. According to Terri, who at the time was a conservationist with a specific interest in the care of predatory animals, she first met Irwin whilst visiting the Queensland Reptile and Fauna Park after hearing about the park's conservation efforts, which of course piqued her interest enough to make a point of visiting the park as part of her trip to Australia to learn from the man himself. When asked to later describe the moment she first saw Steve, Terri notes that he was, quote, the most incredible man I've ever seen. A thought that was quickly interrupted by the second, less fun intrusive thought of, well, he's probably married. As for Steve's perspective on the meeting, he described the moment they first met as literally love at first sight. At the time, he was feeding a half-ton crocodile
so sweet
called
together.
Agro, as you do, because, oh yes, the pair met whilst Irwin was in the middle of a scheduled crocodile feeding show. But he claims he was so taken with Terri that he briefly forgot about the near 15-foot crocodile trying to eat him. He thus quickly wrapped up the show and approached Terri, who'd waited around afterwards to introduce herself, at which point a park employee took a photo of the pair. As Terri would recount in an episode of The Crocodile Hunter, this photo became one of her most treasured possessions, as it quite literally captured the moment they first met. And it just gets more adorable from there. For the rest of the story, we turn to Terri's autobiography, in which she explains that while their first meeting was where the spark between them was created, she was unsure if their attraction was mutual. A few days later, Irwin invited her to return and see some of his team's conservation work firsthand. During the second meeting, Terri tried to surreptitiously figure out whether Irwin was in a relationship, first by trying to spot a wedding ring, which Irwin didn't wear, something she didn't think was concrete proof because she presumed, quite accurately, we might add, that a man in his line of work likely wouldn't wear jewelry as it would pose a potential risk to any animal he handled. When the pair later married, neither wore a wedding band for this exact reason. Following this, Terri tried asking pointed questions about Steve's life, which he happily answered, and revealed a whole host of things, like the fact that he literally lived at the park and had been caring for animals his entire life. Finally, Irwin, seemingly picking up what she was putting down, answered her unspoken question without prompting by excitedly jumping to his feet during the conversation and asking if she'd like to meet his girlfriend. Terri feigned enthusiasm and told Irwin she'd love to. It was then that he stood up and called for his girlfriend, Sue, his pet dog, who bounded toward him and leapt into his arms. Double smooth. According to Terri, this is the exact moment she fell in love with Irwin. According to Steve, for him it was when he first laid eyes on her. What followed was a whirlwind romance where Irwin laid on the Australian charm as thick as he could spread it, first taking Terri to an all-you-can-eat seafood buffet.
Wait. What are you saying? Raising by guy. Sorry, I had to say it.
And tricking her into thinking he could smell when ducks were close by. Supposedly an old bushman's trick right out of Crocodile Dundee that involves telling an attractive lady you can somehow sense that an animal is nearby and then revealing the location of said animal to the astounded and presumably very impressed woman. Irwin would later admit to Terri that he couldn't actually smell ducks at all and that the restaurant he'd taken her to was near a duck pond that he'd played at as a child. Needless to say, in the face of this beast of a man with a heart of gold and moves that make even the most hetero of males want to have his babies, Terri didn't stand a chance, and Steve was by all accounts just as impressed with his new counterpart. The pair were engaged within 4 months of meeting and later married in Terri's home state of Oregon before returning to Australia. One noteworthy thing about Owen's marriage is that it is one...
Interesting. Okay, that I had no idea that they actually got married in Oregon before returning to Australia. Huh. I wonder why they made that decision. Yeah, Cortez, I thought the same thing. I thought the same thing that they would have gotten married in Australia, but no, they got married in her home state of Oregon. Interesting. Well, okay, Nat, you have to remember this was what, the 1980s when this happened. 4 months isn't so much of a whirlwind romance back in the 80s. That was 4 months. I would kind of categorize it as being average, honestly. Like in today, 4 months would be absolutely whirlwind because a lot of couples are usually together nowadays. I would say like a year or more before getting married, but back in the 80s, it's a completely different story. 4 months was the equivalent of about a year in terms of a relationship. So, like I'd say the average was probably 6 months. So theirs was a bit sooner than the average, but not overtly so, I'd say.
One of the few times in his entire clothed adult life that he didn't wear his trademark khakis, opting to wear a tuxedo instead. In search of other
Yes.
instances where he wore literally anything else, because we're nerdy like that, and not because our team of authors totally have a thing for Irwin, resulting in the necessity for a pact to clear each other's search histories in the event of our deaths. It was for science, no other reason. In any event, we scoured more hours of Steve Irwin's footage than some might say was warranted, and we could find only a single other instance where he's not wearing those khakis. A 2005 interview with Conan O'Brien in which he wore jeans, which was immediately picked up on by the host, who notes how weird it is to see Irwin in something other than shorts. For anyone curious, the reason Irwin was wearing jeans instead of his trademark shorts is because he was in the middle of filming a show where animals underwent surgery, and the vets forbade him from wearing anything short for hygienic reasons. Besides that instance, his wedding and a handful of appearances where wearing shorts simply wouldn't have been safe, like trips to the Arctic and desert where Irwin absolutely had to cover up to protect the elements from the glorious sight of his khaki lower half, he always wore his trademark shorts. Hell, we even found footage of Irwin surfing in his khakis, which is incredible for both that and the fact that midway through
he
hanging
surfs?
10,
I
he
didn't know
spotted a
this.
sea snake in the water and immediately stopped what he was doing to put it on his head. As you do.
Oh my
While it was
god.
often rumored that
She did that so much. I've seen old videos of his Crocodile Hunter TV show where he would just they'd be out filming and they'd be out somewhere and all of a sudden he would just stop and then go sprinting off somewhere just to check out a lizard or a snake or a small little mammal. Out of nowhere, he would just stop and sprinting off because he caught sight of an animal that either he needed help or he thought was interesting. This was just his fucking way.
Irwin was contractually obligated to wear the outfit for branding reasons. The truth is, it was simply what he felt most comfortable wearing when handling animals, and since he was pretty much always handling animals, remember, he literally lived in a zoo, it basically became his default attire 99% of the time, up to and including the birth of his own daughter and at other people's weddings, which, yes, he attended in his trademark attire. As why he didn't like wearing a suit, Irwin summed it up best when he told an interview from the Northern Echo, quote, "The scariest moment of my entire life was my wedding, where I had to wear a tuxedo and this thing around my neck. I would sooner take on a boa constrictor. I was so scared, sweat was running down my hands. Yes, mate, I've worn a suit and will never do it again. I've learned from my mistake." Perhaps nothing sums up how committed to the bit Irwin and his family were more than the fact that following his passing, TV executives felt they needed to update the family's look when the whole Irwin clan revealed that they literally had no idea what to wear besides Steve's go-to outfit. At the entire family's insistence, this overhaul didn't see anyone stop wearing khaki, but they did get better tailored outfits and more modern haircuts to reflect the times. However, in keeping with Irwin's memory and personal sense of style, the Queensland Reptile and Fauna Park, or Australia Zoo as it's now known, sells the oversized variant he favoured as a souvenir for fans. Speaking...
Okay, I'm sorry. This is fucking adorable. This is fucking adorable. I mean, Robert does not seem overly impressed, but look at Dinty. Look at Bindi. They're sitting there next to with a young cheetah. Yeah, acting like it's their house cat. The cheetah is just chewing. Totally cool. Oh my god, this is so adorable. Especially with the cheetah.
as it's now known, sells the oversized variant he favoured as a souvenir for fans. Speaking of the name change of that zoo, this occurred around the time Terri and Irwin married and the Crocodile Hunter show came into existence. Proving they were a match made in heaven, after marrying in 1992, the pair opted to, instead of going on a honeymoon, travel Australia rescuing crocodiles, filming the whole thing for posterity, and with the hopes of turning it into a documentary to raise awareness for their conservation efforts. This footage was ultimately edited into a documentary for Australian TV by a guy called John Stainton. While this documentary was warmly received, it didn't really receive much international recognition. However,
no, they cannot, Dwayne. They mew and chirp. Yeah. Cheetah's their method of communication is meows and primarily chirping. Cheetahs chirp. Chirp, 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 chirp. That's how cheetahs communicate.
was convinced that Irwin could be a star if the right people saw what he was up to, frequently traveling with a beat-up VHS tape of Irwin's antics that he'd show to anyone and everyone who'd listen, usually telling them that it featured, quote, footage of this crazy guy in Australia who goes out and captures crocodiles and relocates them. He's been making these home videos, and I think it would be a good show. As a reminder, the tape Stainton was talking about was Irwin's honeymoon. In any event, a copy of this tape eventually caught the eye of the Discovery Network executives in 1996, around the time that they were toying with the idea of launching an entirely new channel that revolves solely around animal-themed programming, Animal Planet. To test out whether Irwin would be a good fit for a show of his own, Discovery sent a small team of cameramen to Australia to basically just follow him around during his day-to-day life and see what they could capture, as well as to size up the man himself. According to most everyone who took part in this test, it was clear that Irwin was born to be in front of the camera, and his natural charisma and genuineness that had won over the heart of his wife was immediate.
Okay, I have not watched Animal Planet for a very long time. What does Animal Planet show these days? Like, did it go the route of arts and entertainment, where arts and entertainment A&E is now just like scummy ass reality TV shows? Like, what does Animal Planet have? I thought Animal Planet has done, like, still does. They stopped focusing on animals a long time ago? Oh, they're doing game worm version of Cops. That's not so terrible. It's more about I survived an attack from an animal. Oh, Steve Irwin would be so displeased. Steve would be so displeased that Animal Planet stopped being about conservation. Yes, J10, AP is Discovery. That is correct. Steve would be most unhappy.
Evident to all. As for what they shot, the nature of Irwin's work resulted in such a wide variety of footage that some of it ended up being used seasons later, and a large amount was directly the result of Irwin just being himself. For example, there's a now iconic moment in The Crocodile Hunter where Irwin tells his crew to stop the car because there's a big-ass snake by the side of the road. While many assumed this moment was scripted in some way, according to camera operator Steve Elkins, the whole thing was entirely spontaneous. Irwin really did just happen to spot a cool snake by the side of the road and told the crew to pull over to make sure that it was okay. Something, as discussed, he'd been doing since his schoolboy days. It was also around this time that Irwin created some of his earliest die-hard fans and began to forge the legend of his impossibly massive cast-iron balls that could only be contained in his magical car keys. For instance, another story recounted by Elkin was when he was getting B-roll of a rescued mountain lion and the creature suddenly lunged at Elkin to attack. Before he could react, in a flash, Irwin had placed himself between Elkin and the lion. Irwin then stared down the creature until it backed away. Elkin would later recount, Irwin simply muttered after, "I can't let you get hurt." As you might imagine, when the camera crew went back to Discovery...
Okay, he needs to stop saying balls of steel and change that up to balls of fucking tungsten. Okay, this man leapt in front of a charging mountain lion and stared it the fuck down. The mountain lion backed down from Steve fucking Irwin. Okay. Wait. Yes, this man has balls of tungsten. Not steel. Fucking tungsten.
They were enthusiastic and didn't really have anything bad that they could say about this effortlessly badass human who at various points had done things like scaring off a black bear through sheer intimidation, or at one point dove into the water filled with cottonmouth snakes holding a camera after the cameraman tasked with the job admitted to being too scared to do it. Discovery were suitably impressed by these stories and the footage shot, editing it together with a bunch of footage they'd shot of the recently renamed Australia Zoo and the Irwin's own honeymoon footage to create what is now known as the Crocodile Hunter. The show was an immediate hit, catapulting Irwin to international superstardom, which he was always humble about, expressing in interviews that his only goal was simply to raise awareness about wildlife and its conservation. This isn't to say that Irwin didn't profit from the show or his countless TV appearances, and of course, his big screen debut in The Crocodile Hunter Collision Course, with Irwin having an estimated net worth of about $10 million at the time of his death, although noteworthy, much of that was tied up in real estate, and in particular, the Australia Zoo, which was also, remember, where he also lived and owned outright after being gifted it by his father in the 90s. Despite a rather sizable net worth, Irwin enjoyed few of the trappings of wealth you'd associate with a massive internationally recognized star. To quote the man himself, "I don't need a Ferrari, or a Rolex, or a gold-plated dunny seatmate. I live in a 3-bedroom brick home that I've always lived in. Every cent we earn from the Crocodile Hunter goes straight into conservation."
Oh,
Irwin's
God,
commitment
that man.
to this ethos was
And there it is. And there it is. Right there. Every cent that they earned went right into conservation. He didn't care about material goods outside of what would make his family happy. And his family didn't need a shit ton of material goods. His family was happy because they loved each other. They lived comfortably, but they weren't like quote unquote well off, but they lived comfortably. And so everything went into it. All this man ever did was try and help nature. He spent his entire life, he dedicated his entire life to conservation, to education, to preserving nature. When humans would try and encroach on it or would do something because they didn't understand. This is a man with a level of dedication to good that we don't see anymore. We don't see this anymore. This level of care. There are people that pretend. There are plenty of people that pretend that they care about conservation and saving nature. None of them put their metaphorical money and their real money where their mouth is. Except for Steve. Steve Irwin not only put his money where his mouth is, he led by example. He 100% led by example. He not only talked the talk, he walked the fucking walk. Every day of his life. Every fucking day. God. Oh, God. No, of course he wouldn't fish. Of course he wouldn't. He would never blame an animal for just being an animal. For being what it is. Oh. And I cannot think of a single person on the planet that did what he did, that lived the way he did, that loved nature the way he did. Like, in one of the most purest of forms.
Crocodile Hunter goes straight into conservation. Irwin's commitment to this ethos was such that even the massive fees he could command for appearances and cameos in other projects were generally donated to either a charity of his choosing or funneled directly back into Australia Zoo to fund it and its various conservation efforts. For example, Irwin is known to have licensed his image to the Australian government for use on posters to raise awareness about the country's quarantine procedures, with all funds for this going to various animal-related causes. The same is true for other commercial endeavors Irwin took part in. As a brief aside, one of the more obscure fundraising efforts Irwin hoped to take part in was a charity fistfight against another celebrity. You see, Irwin was a big fan of combat sports, to the point that his personal bodyguard for many years, yes, the man who wrestled crocodiles had a bodyguard for some reason, Carl Noak, was hired purely because he had a background in martial arts and Irwin wanted someone to teach him. And who better than the man he was literally paying to follow him around all day. In any event, according to Noak, Irwin was a
Me too, Cortanus.
And eventually he was hired to be Irwin's full-time trainer rather than his bodyguard, when it became evident that the man who suplexed half-ton crocodiles for a living and was otherwise beloved by most humans probably didn't need help defending himself. During this period, Irwin repeatedly pitched the idea of a celebrity MMA match to producers and television execs that he could bend the ear of, with all the proceeds going to charity. However, the idea was
It's
shot
fine.
down every time as they were worried Irwin would get hurt. Remember, these same executives were paying him to take part in a show where he routinely put deadly snakes on his head. Irwin, nonetheless,
Okay. But, counterpoint. Counterpoint to what, he's obviously saying, like, he's mocking the fact that the TV execs, didn't want Steve Irwin to get hit in an MMA fight when he spends all of his life working with animals that could kill him at a moment's notice. However, no, Cortana, actually, I kind of get what they're going with here. When Steve is doing his conservation efforts and he's working with dangerous animals, he understands the animals. He knows how they work, he knows how they behave, he knows how to handle them. Hand-to-hand combat with a human is wholly different than working with an animal, a dangerous animal. It is a very different kind of thing. So, well, a lot of people like TV execs, like, he handles crocodiles for a living. Yes. But crocodiles don't throw blindingly fast punches and kicks randomly. Animals, while dangerous, do have something of a behavioral pattern that Steve knew and could work with. He understood the animals, and thus he could work with them because he knew he understood how they think, how they would behave. Whereas with a human in a fight, it's a whole different ballgame. It's a completely different kind of quote unquote dangerous animal. And it's not one that you could, read and anticipate and things like that. It's very different.
kept up with training and even got as far as pitching some names to execs, one of which was Wesley Snipes, after Irwin learned that the actor was similarly a keen martial artist. This time, the idea was ultimately scrapped when Irwin learned he was half a foot taller than Snipes. Irwin was 6'2", Snipes stands at 5'9", and deemed that any fight wouldn't be fair.
Hey. Hold the fuck up! Steve Irwin is 6'2"? I had no idea. I had no fucking idea Steve Irwin was that tall. I always figured he was like 5'9", 5'10". I had no idea he was that big. Exactly, Matt. That's what I thought. He didn't seem like he was like a runt. I figured he was like average height, 5'9", 5'10". I did not realize he was like 6'2". Holy shit! Yeah, like, David, most people are taller than me. That's not a fair comparison. And Falcon, are you okay? You said you've had a power outage since like 4:30-ish. Is everything okay? No, Fishy. No, it is back. That's why Falcon's here. Falcon was saying that the power's been out for him since 4:30. Bored out of your mind, Falcon. I hear you. I'm glad your power's back, though. I am glad.
Yes, you heard that right. Steve Irwin literally turned down the chance to fight Blade because he didn't think it would be fair. For Blade. Another name floated by Irwin before... Another name floated by Irwin before the idea was abandoned entirely was Vin Diesel, who stood closer to Irwin's own height. Diesel's around
Vin
6
Diesel's
feet
not a
tall
fighter.
and had similar action movie chops. According to Noak, Irwin went to see Vin Diesel vehicle the Pacifier multiple times purely to size up Diesel before he was finally convinced to drop the idea by executives and go back to supposedly safer pastime of wrestling crocodiles. And that was...
Like, Vin Diesel really isn't a fighter. Is he? Like, yeah, he portrays one in his movies, but I never really got the impression that he was like, can he actually fight? Outside of his movies, I really know very, very little about Vin Diesel. Is he trained in martial arts? Okay. I had no idea. I really know nothing about the man outside of the movies that he's been in.
basically what Irwin spent the rest of his time doing between various media appearances until his untimely death in 2006. According to those present when Irwin was fatally struck in the heart by a stingray whilst filming footage for a documentary on the Barrier Reef, his last words were quite fitting for a man as genuine and plain-spoken as Irwin was. He simply stated, "I'm dying, mate." The outpouring of grief following Irwin's passing is hard to quantify. But as a final thing, I think sums up his life, and the kind of man he was, is that Irwin's father, Bob, upon being offered a state funeral for Australia's favourite son, turned the offer down, telling the Australian Prime Minister that his son would much rather be remembered as an ordinary bloke. Irwin was ultimately buried in a private service in the one place he felt most at home, the Australian
Zoo.
Thank you for watching.
Oh, man. Okay, so he didn't mention it, and I'm going to mention it. So, in regards to Steve Irwin's movie, what was it? Crocodile Hunter, Crash Course, or Collision Course. Crocodile Hunter Collision Course. The movie that he made, two things about that movie. Number one, at the premiere of Crocodile Hunter Collision Course, I remember seeing a video that in the theater, like he went to the premiere at, I don't even remember what theater it was, at the premiere, as everybody was coming in, when everybody, like all the celebrities and everything, he actually stood up, like on his seat or something like that, and actually did like a small speech about how the only thing that he wanted for this movie was to just promote conservation and to showcase how important conservation is for the planet. That was at the premiere of his movie. He cared about the conservation part of it. Because if any of you have ever seen Crocodile Hunter Collision Course, it's the whole concept, quick and dirty basic concept of it. There's this piece of like military tech or something that gets lost in the Australian outback, and there's like spies or something that are going to get it. There's like, it's literally like two movies in one. And it's a comedy spy movie and Steve. And literally every scene with Steve Irwin in it is just him doing Crocodile Hunter. Like he like doing his TV show. That was that all Steve did in the entire movie was his Crocodile Hunter TV show. So it was basically the Crocodile Hunter with better cameras. That was what he did. It was like two totally different movies smushed together. Like one kind of had really nothing to do with the other. It really did. And it was a little weird in that respect. And I think the only reason why Steve did it is because half of the movie was him doing his thing as the Crocodile Hunter and promoting conservation. And it was incredible. And like that shows where his focus was. He didn't care about Hollywood. He didn't care about, the same race thing. He only cared about nature and the conservation of it. That's what he cared about. That is how he lived his life. And that is why he is and forever will be one of the greatest humans. Absolutely one of the greatest humans.